It was a blistering afternoon in the heart of the Arizona desert, where the sun beat down mercilessly on the cracked earth and the distant mountains shimmered under waves of heat. A lone mule stood by a wooden trough filled with water, its ears twitching as it stared at the liquid surface. The man who had led it there, a wiry figure with dust-streaked boots and a weather hat pulled low over his brow, watched silently from a few paces away. His name was Caleb, and he'd been riding hard for days, chasing whispers of gold that echoed through every saloon and campfire story in the West. The mule refused a drink. It wasn't thirsty. Caleb could see the whites of its eyes shifting nervously, its hooves pawing the dry dirt around the trough. Little did they know, this moment would unravel secrets buried deeper than any mine shaft and darken the shadows cast by the setting sun. Caleb sighed, wiping sweat from his forehead with a grimy sleeve. "What's got into you?" he muttered, stepping closer to the stubborn animal. He leaned down, inspecting the water more closely. It looked clear enough, crystal even, but something about it felt off. There was an unnatural stillness to it, as if the water itself were holding its breath. But then, just as Caleb straightened up, dismissing his unease, the mule let out a low bray, louder this time, its legs stiffening as though rooted to the spot. "What is it?" Caleb whispered, glancing around cautiously. The wind carried no sound but the faint rustle of tumbleweeds rolling across the barren landscape. The air seemed heavier now, charged with a tension that prickled against the skin like static electricity. He reached for his rifle, resting it loosely across his arm, before turning back to the trough. And that's when he saw it. The faintest ripple in the water, moving not outward but upward, as though something beneath the surface were stirring. Caleb froze, his heart thudding in his chest. "Impossible," he breathed, leaning closer despite the growing dread coiling in his gut. The ripples grew stronger, forming patterns that defied logic, swirling clockwise one moment, counterclockwise the next. It was mesmerizing, almost hypnotic, until Caleb realized the water wasn't merely moving. It was alive. Days earlier, Caleb had found himself in the dusty town of Blackwater Crossing, a place known more for its lawlessness than its charm. The streets were lined with sagging wooden buildings, their paint peeling under the relentless desert sun. Saloons buzzed with rowdy patrons, while gamblers loitered outside card rooms, cigarette smoke curling lazily into the evening air. It was here, in the dim glow of the Lantern and Flask Tavern, that Caleb first heard the tale of the lost vein, a vein of purest gold said to lie hidden somewhere deep within the Devil's Gulch, a treacherous canyon system notorious for its deadly traps and mysterious disappearances. "It's cursed," warned old Jedediah, a toothless prospector nursing a mug of whiskey in the corner. His voice was raspy, each word laced with equal parts warning and awe. "Folks go in there looking for fortune, but none ever come out." Caleb raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. "Sounds like superstition to me." Jedediah chuckled, shaking his head. "You'll believe it when you see it, boy. Mark my words." Despite the cautionary tales, Caleb set out early the next morning, determined to prove them wrong. With nothing but a canteen, a bedroll, and his trusty mule, he ventured into the unforgiving wilderness beyond Blackwater Crossing. For 3 days he navigated endless dunes, skirted venomous snakes, and endured scorching temperatures that left his lips cracked and his throat parched. By the time he reached the outskirts of Devil's Gulch, he was running dangerously low on supplies and patience. The gulch itself was unlike anything Caleb had ever seen. Towering cliffs rose on either side, their jagged edges carved by millennia of wind and rain. Shadows stretched long across the narrow path, creating an eerie sense of being watched. Caleb tightened his grip on the reins, urging the mule forward despite its increasing reluctance. Every step felt heavier than the last, as though the very ground beneath them resisted his presence. By the 4th day, Caleb began to notice strange things happening around him. Footprints appeared in the sand where moments earlier there had been none. Whispers drifted on the breeze, indistinct yet hauntingly familiar. And then there was the water, the elusive, life-saving resource that seemed to mock him from afar. Pools glistened tantalizingly in the distance, only to vanish upon approach, leaving behind nothing but scorched earth and disappointment. It was during one such mirage that Caleb stumbled upon the watering hole. Nestled between 2 boulders, it gleamed like polished glass, untouched by the harsh environment surrounding it. Hope surged within him as he dismounted, leading the weary mule toward the unexpected salvation. But the mule's refusal to drink shattered that hope almost instantly, plunging Caleb into confusion and frustration. Now, standing beside the trough, Caleb couldn't shake the feeling that something far greater than mere thirst was at play. The movement in the water grew more pronounced, spiraling faster and faster until it resembled a miniature whirlpool. Caleb backed away instinctively, his hand tightening on the rifle. Whatever was causing this phenomenon, it wasn't natural, and whatever it was, it didn't want to be disturbed. Suddenly, the ground beneath him trembled, a low rumble vibrating through the soles of his boots. Caleb spun around, searching for the source of the disturbance. In the distance, the cliffs lining Devil's Gulch began to crack and shift, sending clouds of dust billowing into the sky. The once clear water in the trough turned murky, churning violently as if caught in a storm. Caleb's mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. "Get control of yourself," he snapped aloud, attempting to steady his nerves. But the fear clawing at his insides refused to be silenced. He glanced at the mule, whose wide eyes mirrored his own terror. "We need to get out of here," he muttered, already knowing it might be too late. As if on cue, the water erupted, spewing forth in a torrential spray that drenched Caleb and the mule alike. From the depths emerged a creature unlike anything he'd ever imagined. A serpentine beast with scales that shimmered like molten silver, its massive form writhing and twisting as it slithered onto dry land. Its eyes, glowing with otherworldly light, locked onto Caleb, pinning him in place with their intensity. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Caleb's breath caught in his throat, his mind struggling to process the sight before him. This was no ordinary animal. It was something ancient, something primordial, born of a world long forgotten. And it was angry. The creature let out a deafening roar, the sound reverberating through Caleb's very bones. Instinct kicked in, overriding his paralysis. Grabbing the mule's reins, he yanked hard, forcing the frightened animal into motion. Together, they bolted down the canyon path, the creature's enraged cries echoing behind them like thunder. Their flight was desperate, chaotic. Rocks tumbled from above, narrowly missing them as the canyon walls shook with the force of the beast's pursuit. Caleb urged the mule onward, ignoring the burning in his lungs and the weight of exhaustion dragging at his limbs. Behind them, the creature gained speed, its sinuous body weaving effortlessly through obstacles that would have halted a human or horse. But then, just as all hope seemed lost, Caleb spotted a narrow crevice ahead, a potential escape route. Without hesitation, he steered the mule toward it, squeezing to the tight passage moments before the creature arrived. Trapped by the sheer rock faces, the beast thrashed furiously, its roars of frustration fading into the distance as Caleb and the mule continued their frantic retreat. Hours later, they emerged in the canyon, blinking against the bright sunlight that greeted them. Caleb collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, while the mule nuzzled his shoulder, its earlier fear giving way to relief. They had escaped, but Caleb knew the experience would haunt him forever. Little did he realize, however, that the true revelation awaited him miles away, back in Blackwater Crossing. Upon returning to the tavern, he recounted his harrowing tale to anyone who would listen. Most dismissed it as nonsense, attributing his wild claims to fatigue or delirium. But Jedediah, sitting quietly in his usual corner, listened intently, his expression unreadable. When Caleb finished, Jedediah finally spoke. "You saw it, didn't you? The guardian of the lost vein." Caleb frowned. "Guardian?" Jedediah nodded solemnly. "That thing you encountered. It protects the gold. No one's ever come close to finding it without facing that same fate." A chill ran down Caleb's spine as understanding dawned. The lost vein wasn't merely a legend. It was real, and the creature he had faced was its keeper, ensuring that only those worthy or foolish enough would dare seek its treasure. In that moment, Caleb made a decision. The allure of gold no longer held sway over him. Whatever riches lay hidden in Devil's Gulch, they weren't worth the cost of confronting such a monstrous protector again. As he stepped out of the tavern into the starlit night, he glanced back at the canyon entrance, shrouded in darkness and mystery. Somewhere out there, the water still moved, guarding secrets older than time itself. And Caleb knew better than to disturb it ever again. Caleb's journey, though harrowing, was far from over. The encounter with the guardian of the lost vein had left him shaken, but also intrigued. He couldn't help but wonder about the stories he dismissed as mere superstition before embarking on his quest. Perhaps there were truths buried deeper in the Wild West than anyone cared to admit. Truths that lay hidden beneath layers of myth and mystery. Days turned into weeks as Caleb wandered further west, driven by a mix of curiosity and restlessness. His mule, now more cautious than ever, seemed attuned to Caleb's unease. They traveled through landscapes that shifted dramatically, from scorching deserts to dense pine forests, where the air carried the scent of pine resin and damp earth. It was here, amidst towering trees and shadowy glades, that Caleb stumbled upon another peculiar occurrence, one that would challenge everything he thought he knew about the world. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, Caleb set up camp near a small stream. The water flowed steadily, its surface shimmering under the fading light. After feeding the mule, Caleb sat by the fire, staring into the flames as they crackled softly. The forest around him was eerily quiet, save for the occasional hoot of an owl or the rustle of leaves stirred by the wind. Yet, despite the calm, Caleb felt an inexplicable tension in the air, as if something or someone was watching. It wasn't until midnight that the stillness broke. A low growl echoed through the woods, sending shivers down Caleb's spine. Instinctively, he reached for his rifle, scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. At first, nothing appeared out of the ordinary. Then, emerging from the shadows, came a figure, not a man, not a beast, but something in between. Its silhouette was humanoid, yet its eyes glowed faintly, casting an unsettling aura around it. Caleb froze, unsure whether to raise his weapon or lower it. "Who are you?" Caleb demanded, his voice steady despite the turmoil within him. The figure stepped closer, revealing itself to be a woman dressed in tattered clothing, her face pale and marked with scars that told stories of battles long past. Her hair hung loosely around her shoulders, tangled and unkempt, but her gaze held a piercing intensity that made Caleb shift uncomfortably. "I am no one," she replied, her voice smooth yet tinged with sorrow. "And I am everyone." Confused, Caleb lowered his rifle slightly. "What do you mean? What do you want?" The woman smiled faintly, though there was no warmth in her expression. "I have been waiting for someone like you, Caleb, someone who dares to seek what others fear to find." Caleb frowned. "How do you know my name?" Her smile widened, almost imperceptibly. "Because I've been watching. You see, not all secrets are buried in gold or guarded by beasts. Some lie in plain sight, buried in the hearts of men." Before Caleb could respond, the woman extended a hand toward the stream nearby. To his astonishment, the water began to ripple unnaturally, forming patterns that resembled writing. Caleb squinted, trying to make sense of the symbols etched onto the surface. They weren't letters he recognized, but they carried a weight, a significance that resonated deep within him. "What is this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's a message," the woman said simply. "From those who came before. From those who will come after. It's a warning, a promise, and a test." "A test?" Caleb repeated, gripping his rifle tighter. "Of what?" "Of your courage," she answered. "Of your resolve, and of your willingness to accept the unbelievable." As she spoke, the symbols in the water began to glow brighter, their light illuminating the surrounding area. Caleb noticed, for the first time, strange carvings etched into the bark of the trees nearby. Each carving matched the symbols in the water, forming a pattern that stretched farther into the forest than he could see. "The forest knows," the woman continued, her voice taking on a haunting quality. "It remembers. Every step you take, every breath you draw, it watches, and it waits." "For what?" Caleb pressed, his heart pounding in his chest. "For you to decide," she said cryptically. "Will you walk away, or will you embrace the truth?" Caleb hesitated, torn between caution and curiosity. Part of him wanted to flee, to leave the forest and its mysteries behind. But another part, a larger part, urged him to stay, to uncover whatever secrets lay hidden within these woods. The woman must have sensed his internal struggle, because she nodded approvingly. Good. You hesitate, but you don't run. That means you're ready. Ready for what? Caleb asked, exasperation creeping into his tone. For the next chapter, she replied enigmatically. For the trials that await you beyond this point. With that, she turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Caleb alone once more. The glowing symbols in the water dimmed slowly, fading back into the stream as though they had never existed. Caleb stared at the empty space where the woman had stood, his mind racing with questions. Had she been real, or was she a figment of his imagination, conjured by exhaustion and the eerie atmosphere of the forest? Whatever the case, Caleb knew one thing for certain. His journey was only beginning. The following days brought new challenges and revelations. Caleb followed the trail of carvings deeper into the forest, each symbol bringing him closer to the heart of the mystery. Along the way, he encountered strange phenomena. Trees that whispered secrets when touched, streams that flowed uphill, and animals that moved silently, as though invisible to the human eye. One night, while setting up camp, Caleb noticed a peculiar glow emanating from a hollow log nearby. Investigating cautiously, he discovered a cluster of glowing crystals nestled inside. When he touched them, visions flooded his mind. Visions of ancient civilizations, of battles fought under skies filled with stars, of people whose lives intertwined with forces beyond comprehension. When the vision ended, Caleb found himself trembling, both from fear and exhilaration. He realized then that the West was not just a land of gold and glory. It was a place where boundaries blurred, where the line between reality and fantasy became indistinguishable. And so, Caleb pressed on, driven by a hunger for knowledge and a growing acceptance of the unknown. For every question answered, 10 more rose, pulling him further into the labyrinth of mysteries that defined the Wild West. Little did he know, however, that the greatest revelation awaited him just around the corner, a revelation that would change everything he thought he understood about the world and himself. As Caleb ventured deeper into the forest, the air grew heavier, charged with energy that prickled against his skin. The trees seemed to lean inward, their branches forming a canopy so dense that even the faintest glimmer of moonlight struggled to penetrate. Shadows danced erratically at the edges of his vision, and though he knew it was merely the play of light and dark, something about those shifting forms made him uneasy. The mule, sensing Caleb's tension, whinnied softly, its ears flicking nervously. Caleb patted its neck reassuringly, though he doubted either of them would find much comfort in this place. They had been walking for hours, following the trail of carvings etched into the bark of ancient oaks and pines. Each symbol brought Caleb closer to whatever lay at the heart of the forest, but also further from anything familiar or safe. It was during one of these quiet moments, when the only sounds were the crunch of leaves underfoot and the distant hoot of an owl, that Caleb stumbled upon a clearing unlike any other he had seen. The ground here was not covered in moss or fallen needles, but instead gleamed with a strange metallic sheen, as though the earth itself had been polished to perfection. At the center of the clearing stood a massive stone monolith, taller than any tree surrounding it, its surface inscribed with the same glowing symbols Caleb had encountered earlier. Caleb approached cautiously, his hand resting on the grip of his rifle. The symbols pulsed faintly, casting an ethereal glow across the clearing. As he drew nearer, he noticed something unusual. The symbols appeared to be moving, flowing like water down the sides of the monolith. It was mesmerizing, almost hypnotic, until Caleb realized they weren't just flowing. They were spelling out words. "Who dares disturb the sanctum?" The voice resonated through the clearing, deep and commanding, yet devoid of malice. Caleb froze, his breath catching in his throat. He glanced around, searching for the source of the sound, but there was no one, nothing but the monolith and the encircling trees. I'm Caleb," he stammered, stepping back instinctively. "I didn't mean to disturb anything." The monolith emitted a low hum, and the symbols flared brighter for a moment before dimming again. "Caleb," the voice repeated, contemplative. "You carry the mark of curiosity, a hunger for truth. Few who enter this place possess such qualities. Tell me, why have you come?" Caleb hesitated, unsure how to answer. Was it really asking him? Or was this some trick of the mind? Yet the question lingered, demanding a response. I wanted to understand, he admitted finally. To know what lies beyond the stories, beyond the legends. To see what others refuse to believe. There was a pause, long enough for Caleb to wonder if it offended the unseen presence. Then the voice spoke again, softer this time. Understanding comes at a cost, Caleb. Are you prepared to pay it? Caleb swallowed hard, his fingers tightening on the rifle. What kind of cost? A sacrifice, the voice replied cryptically. Not of blood, nor of treasure, but of self. To walk this path is to abandon all certainty, to embrace doubt and contradiction. Can you do that? Caleb considered the question, weighing the weight of its implications. He thought of the guardian of the lost vein, of the glowing crystals in the hollow log, of the woman in the woods whose eyes had burned with secrets untold. Each encounter had pushed him further from the world he once knew, pulling him towards something greater and stranger. And yet, despite the fear gnawing at the edges of his mind, Caleb felt a strange sense of clarity. This was his journey, his choice, and no matter the risks, he could not turn away. Yes, he said firmly, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. I'll pay the cost. The monolith trembled slightly, its symbols flaring once more. A soft wind swept through the clearing, carrying with it the scent of pine and earth, mingling with an unfamiliar aroma, something sweet and metallic, like rain mixing with fire. From the shadows at the edge of the clearing emerged figures, their forms indistinct yet undeniably human. Men and women, young and old, each bearing the same luminous symbols etched into their skin, walked silently toward Caleb, their eyes fixed on him with an intensity that left him breathless. You are chosen, the voice intoned, echoing to the gathering crowd. But remember, Caleb, choice does not guarantee success. It merely opens the door. What happens beyond is up to you. Before Caleb could respond, the ground beneath him shifted suddenly, opening into a chasm that swallowed him whole. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was the faces of strangers, their expressions unreadable, their glowing symbols fading into the void. When Caleb awoke, he found himself lying on a bed of soft grass beneath the sky, painted with hues of gold and crimson. The air smelled fresh, clean, as though purified by some unseen force. Rising slowly, he looked around, taking in the surreal beauty of his surroundings. Rolling hills stretched endlessly in every direction, dotted with vibrant wildflowers and crystal-clear streams. Birds sang melodiously, their voices harmonizing with the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. Yet amidst the tranquility, Caleb sensed an underlying tension, a reminder that this place was not entirely natural. He stood, brushing dirt from his clothes, and called out tentatively, "Hello? Is anyone here?" His voice carried far, bouncing off invisible walls that seemed to enclose the landscape. For a moment, there was silence. Then, from the crest of a nearby hill, a figure appeared, a man dressed in simple attire, his face weathered but kind. He descended slowly, his steps deliberate, until he stood within speaking distance of Caleb. "Welcome," the man said, his voice warm and inviting. "You've arrived at the threshold." "The threshold?" Caleb echoed, frowning. "What does that mean?" "It is the boundary between worlds," the man explained, gesturing expansively at the landscape. "A place where the known meets the unknown, where reality bends to accommodate truths too vast for comprehension. You've crossed it, Caleb, willingly or otherwise. Now you must decide which side you belong to." Caleb stared at the man, trying to process his words. "I don't understand. What truths? Which side?" The man smiled gently, his eyes twinkling with wisdom. "Patience, my friend. Truths are rarely revealed all at once. As for sides, well, let us say that the world you knew has limits. Beyond those limits lies another realm, one filled with wonders and dangers alike. To remain here is to embrace both fully. To return is to forget everything you've seen." Caleb felt a knot form in his stomach. Forget? Could he truly erase the memories of the past few weeks? The guardian, the glowing symbols, the enigmatic woman in the woods? And yet, staying meant stepping into the unknown, abandoning everything familiar for a life defined by uncertainty. "What happens if I stay?" he asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. You grow, the man replied simply. You learn. You become more than you ever imagined possible. But beware, Caleb. Growth often requires pain, and learning can bring sorrow. Are you ready for that? Caleb closed his eyes, picturing the faces of friends and family he had left behind. Would they recognize him if he returned? Or would they see only a stranger, haunted by glimpses of another world? Slowly, he opened his eyes again, meeting the man's gaze with newfound resolve. I think I am, he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. The man nodded approvingly. Then welcome, Caleb, to the threshold. May your journey be fruitful, and may your courage never falter. With that, the man turned and walked away, disappearing over the horizon as quickly as he had appeared. Caleb watched him go, then turned his attention back to the breathtaking landscape around him. Somewhere in the distance, a stream glistened invitingly, its waters shimmering with promise. Without hesitation, Caleb set off toward it, ready to take the next step in his ever-evolving adventure. Little did he know, however, that the true test of his resolve awaited him just beyond the horizon, a test that would push him to the very limits of his humanity and force him to confront the darkest corners of his own soul.